Chapter 3. Walking into Old Mexico as a young, recently widowed woman, I felt like a sacrificial offering. Rough men in straw hats ready to stake their claim on females stood on dusty street corners outside crude, squat buildings. Some leered at me and called out. I asked directions and made my way to the nearby train station. The daily train was almost ready for departure. No experience can prepare you for a ride on a second-class Mexican train, unless you have ridden on a second-class Mexican train. I sat down in my seat only to discover that the window was broken out, and it does grow cold in the desert at night. The good seats with intact windows had already been taken by modest Mexican country women and their children, or by rugged men in straw hats and boots. Actually, the word seat was a misnomer. They were merely hard wooden benches with backs. I was told that the second-class train would take twice as long to reach Mexico City as a first-class train because it stopped in every little village along the way. It was useless asking for a refund. The whole 30-hour trip cost only $10. As I looked around in despair, I noticed that most people were well stocked for the trip. Almost everyone had a plastic net tote stuffed with toilet paper, thin blankets, food, and wet bandanas for wiping their hands and faces. Mexico's more primitive nature seemed attuned to my inner state, yet the overall culture shock was totally numbing. The train pulled out and chugged across the Mexican desert for about an hour, and then stopped every 30 minutes for the rest of the trip. At least the breeze was pleasant. Each time the train arrived at a station, vendors of all ages, their plastic wash tubs stuffed with homemade goods, would descend on us and cram the aisles hawking their wares. Tamales calientes, churros, cerveza fría. Some of the food actually looked quite good, and the people sitting around me smiled in approval when I broke down and bought a chicken tamale. An elderly woman handed me a damp paper napkin from her bag. Using a lavatory, if it was a lavatory, was an experience. These toilets were basically foul-smelling water closets without water. Given the high level of usage and the jouncing of the train, they looked more like animal stalls. The floor in the one I used was wet and sticky. I held my breath and finished quickly, exploding out the door and taking a huge breath in one motion. Some of the Mexicans watched me and laughed good-naturedly. As evening approached, the vendors' wares changed. Now they were selling thin blankets and strong coffee with sugar. The mountains were visible to the east, but we were still traveling through the desert. I decided it would be smart to buy a blanket for $10, but I found it impossible to sleep and availed myself of the coffee stops. During the night, the makeup of the passengers changed from that of a northern desert person to one of a more southerly appearance. Boots were replaced by homemade sandals called huaraches. The tamales went from being wrapped in corn husks and stuffed with chicken to ones wrapped in slick, juicy banana leaves and stuffed with vegetables. I gorged myself on these new tamales. As the sun rose, we were entering a lush tropical mountain area. The foliage extended to the windows of the train. Mist hung in the early morning air. This was Tepic in the state of Nayarit, halfway to Mexico City. The people here were simpler and even friendlier than those in the north. The robust women wore colorful shawls called rebosos wrapped around their shoulders over peasant blouses. Their arms were bronzed and strong. In the north, the colors of the rebosos were drab, and in general the dress was more citified, though simple. A woman seated in front of me leaned over to tell me that the train would turn and head east when we reached Guadalajara, then continue in that direction until we reached the capital of Mexico. I wondered if it would be easy to make a connection to the town of Palenque, how long that trip would be, and if there was a first-class train with cushioned seats and window glass. Late that evening, the train pulled into the modern station of the Distrito Federal, as the Mexicans called their capital. It took more than an hour and a half to travel at modest speed over the city tracks to the railway platforms. I got the impression that Mexico City was almost infinite, sophisticated yet totally barbaric. An Aztec anthill of such colossal proportions that it could no longer be conceived except by Coatlicue, the creator-destroyer goddess who gave birth to it. The ancient Aztec capital on which Mexico City was later built by its conquerors was originally called Tenochtitlan, and it was founded at the site of a prophesied apparition. The Aztecs were told that their capital would be established where they saw an eagle devouring a serpent on a cactus in the middle of a lake. The Aztec people were tenacious, vast, and warlike, and they had an obsession with death. Mexico City bears their lingering warrior presence. The capital station's grand saloon was bustling with activity. There were large directories of trains heading everywhere. On the southbound board, I discovered a train listed for Palenque that would leave at midnight. It was about 9 p.m., and I decided to wait out the time in the station and depart for Palenque that night. I went to the southbound window and asked the clerk for a one-way first-class ticket. He told me the whole train was first class, and that they even had a few Pullman cars. Since I had not slept in 2 days, I jumped at the chance for a train berth with a bed and a private bathroom. Being able to move around made the wait bearable. I went into a restaurant and ordered chicken enchiladas and a cup of atole, a hot cornmeal drink flavored with vanilla and cinnamon or chocolate. Afterward, I found the designated track and stood in line to board the train. The people in line looked like yet another type of Mexican. Most of the men were dressed in white slacks and tunic shirts with sandals. Some carried machetes and woven bags. Many of the women wore brightly embroidered white tunic dresses and gaily woven multicolored rebosos. I noticed one man who was extremely striking. He was medium-sized, bronzed, and trim, yet muscular. He wore a tunic, slacks, and sandals, but his tunic was turquoise, not white. His straw hat reminded me of those worn in the rice paddies of Vietnam, with a little horsehair tassel swinging on the back of it. He was carrying a woven bag of dried plants, and he bent over to arrange something inside it. He apparently saw me watching him out of the corner of his eye. All at once he turned around flamboyantly to face me, removing his hat with a sweep and a flourish and bringing it to his side. His blue-black hair hung a little shorter than his jaw, and his cropped bangs came down nearly to his eyebrows. His grin was large, white, and wide, almost from ear to ear. His ears were pierced, and the holes fitted with small jade plugs. He also had a string of jade beads around his throat. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. This man closely resembled the Mayan in my jungle dream with Don Juan. I dropped my bags, stopped dead, and just stared at him with my mouth gaping. Perspiration began to form on my palms and my stomach churned. I figured that I must have been completely exhausted and imagining the similarity. Suddenly, I felt water in my bowels and rushed off to the ladies' facilities. He just stood there grinning and watching me flee as I disappeared around the corner of the platform. When I slunk back and peeped around the corner, the man stood in place, adjusting his sack again. He looked up at me while tying a knot in a hemp rope that bound his large bundle. He smiled from under the brim of his hat, and then straightened up and took a few steps toward me. I braced myself and stood still, practically paralyzed. He stopped and cocked his head, listening to the announcement of our train's departure. Several young men dressed in white tunics and slacks rushed toward him, speaking in a language that was not Spanish and had a lot of clicks. They seemed to treat him with deference. The group of them had short dark hair and very finely chiseled beak-like noses. I swore I heard them say Chutch, the Mayan name from my dream. They picked up his sack and carried it onto the train car. The train was called again, and I hurried on to the Pullman car that was behind the one the man and his companions had boarded. As the train pulled out, I slipped into my pajamas and climbed into the sleeping berth. I was too weary to reflect on the events of the day, and after we left Mexico City and headed into the hills, the darkness of the compartment and the rhythmic movement of the train lulled me to sleep. In the morning, my compartment was warm and stuffy. I stuck my head out into the hallway, and a passing conductor told me we were about 10 hours from Palenque. The area was densely vegetated and broken up by cities and towns. Having slept for nearly half the trip, I was starving. So I quickly washed, dressed, and moseyed into the next car to await the vendors. The first-class cars had vinyl upholstered seats and window glass. There was also a visible improvement in cleanliness. I was told this train did not stop as often as the second class, and so I had a short wait until we arrived at the next big town. I walked up the aisle looking for a seat. On my right, about halfway up the car, I passed the man from the train station and his companions occupying 2 seats. They were chomping on pistachios. The man smiled at me as I walked past. It appeared that the only available seat was in front of his. When I turned around, he engagingly patted the top of that seat with one hand while spitting out a shell into the other. "Are you hungry, girlie?" he asked in oddly accented Spanish as I sat down. "I'm hoping for tamales," I replied, speaking for my stomach. He and his 3 companions burst out laughing. "Maybe they'll have yucca tamales with almonds. Have you tried those? They're my favorites." From the seat behind him, one of his companions called out, "I like the pineapple tamales with raisins." They all smiled. "These are my nephews, Eligio, Teofilo, and Ignacio," said the older man. "My nickname is Juan. They're from the area around Palenque, but I'm originally from an area near Tayasal, or as it is now called, Flores, Guatemala, which is close to the ruins of Tikal. Do you know the ruins?" "That's one of the reasons I came to Mexico." "Really?" Chan asked in feigned surprise, his eyebrows raised. "Yes," I continued. "I want to see what has been. I'm not so keen on what is." My tone was rather dejected. "That's the best reason to come," Chan said, his tone strangely soothing. "Yes, things have changed, but the temples are still precious marvels." Chan spoke with strong emotion. I instinctively liked this man. The train was stopping in the damp hill town of San Andres Tuxtla in the state of Veracruz. The awaited tamale vendors boarded the train. "They have yucca tamales," Eligio explained. He bought enough for all of us, and I thanked him profusely. "It's a good thing we knew what to pick," Chan commented. "This area is full of wizards, and who knows what they put in their food." I allowed that comment to pass, munching on my tamale as the train chugged through the hilly area of pueblos called the Tuxtlas. The group was quiet for a few minutes while we ate and then relaxed, gazing out the window at the thick green vegetation. "This area is very damp," Chan began, tapping my back and shoulder. "A lot of moisture means many mosquitoes for you." "Mosquitoes don't like me that much." I turned in my seat to face him again. "Oh, these will," he snickered. "Do you have a hammock and a mosquito net?" "No, I was planning on staying at a hotel." "You won't like them," Eligio said from his seat. "No fresh air." Chan opened his eyes wide and stared at me. "What? You'll be too far to walk to the ruins. The town of Palenque is about 7 miles away, and you'll only be able to see the sights during government hours. The best time to visit is in the early morning or at twilight when there are no people. That's what the Maya in the area do. But I don't know anyone nearby who'd put me up. I saw where this might lead, and as a solo female, I was being cautious. There are camping grounds, but they're still a little far. My sister Esmeralda, the mother of these 3, Chan said, nodding at his nephews. Has a place about a mile north of the ruins. She runs a small roadside restaurant. That's where we're going. I'll stay for a while, but these fellows will go to their own homes. You're welcome to stay with us. Oh, I couldn't possibly. I stammered, looking away. Of course you can. You don't know how much. You don't know much about us. That's why you feel uncomfortable. I understand, but strangers stay often, Chan argued. Uncle Chan is a healer, Ignacio proclaimed. People from all over the Mayan area come for his cures, and many stay for days. My mother even had archaeologists from the university stay with her. She's used to it, believe me. When he visits, Uncle Chan has a hut he uses just for his patients, and if it's vacant, you can stay there and have privacy. Chan seemed a little shy about his nephew's disclosure. He turned to me when Ignacio was finished. We have hammocks and nets. You can pay my sisters for meals. She's a very good cook. There's a waterfall about a mile from the hut that's great for bathing. And we can explore the ruins in the evening after my patients leave. I'm a very good guide, and I won't charge you much. His offer appeared genuine, and it was apparent to me that he was kind and trustworthy. His nephews were also very well-mannered. A good family, I had heard that in Mexico. A good family. I had heard that in Mexico, mi casa es su casa, my house is your house, was a philosophy, and it was considered rude to refuse a sincere invitation. I felt a little uneasy about it, but cautiously accepted the offer. His nephews whooped. They told me that their uncle would most likely be very busy during the day, and that I should explore the ruins with them as well. When the people of the region hear that Uncle Chan is there, they'll start lining up, Teofilo said, sitting down beside me. I went to see a friend who lives outside of Toluca in the state of Mexico, Chan added as an explanation. That's how I came to be in the train station. My friend is an herbalist. He collects medicinal plants specific to that area. He always gifts me with many of them when I visit him. They're in the sack I'm carrying with me. Chan wore a sly little grin. There were about 8 more hours before we arrived at Palenque. Chan's nephews retrieved their hats from the baggage racks above the seats and placed them over their faces to take naps. I excused myself and went back to my compartment to do the same. It was 7 p.m. when the conductor announced our arrival. I was eating another round of tamales. I quickly finished up, grabbed my backpack, and walked to the next car to exit the train with Chan and his nephews. It was very humid on the platform. The twilight filtering through the dense jungle had a greenish hue. An attractive, robust, middle-aged woman with gray-streaked black braids down to her strong hips waved to us and sauntered over. Her smile was very engaging. She was neither extremely dark nor pale, but a luminous mixture. The woman wore a cotton tunic dress with open lace panels above the chest and at the short sleeves, and she had on plastic sandals. "What's up, Chan?" she said in Spanish, stepping up and kissing him on the cheek. She now smiled at me. "Is she with you?" "Yes, Esmeralda. Marilyn, this is my sister." The two of them did not look like brother and sister. In fact, they looked so different that it must have been a family joke. "Is she going to stay in the hut?" Esmeralda asked coyly. "Yes," Chan replied. "Well, you're welcome," Esmeralda said to me, nodding her head. "Chan, there's a woman with a baby who's been waiting for you. I think he may have susto. Fright," she added. Looking back at me, she now pecked her boys on the cheek in a perfunctory manner and then strode off with us following after her. At the bus stop, we made polite conversation, standing with our bags beneath the darkening sky. "When we arrive home, I'll fix you something wonderful to eat," Esmeralda said effusively, as if food were a magical act of love. Her heart seemed to swell in her chest, and she clasped her hands there. She was very beautiful and gracious. I felt that I had made a good choice. On the way out of town, we passed a large public sculpture. It was a bust of the most famous ruler of Palenque, Pakal Votan, who built a temple of inscriptions, similar to the Egyptian pyramids, to house his remains. He was in a full leather headdress, and the lines of the white sculptures were exquisite. Classic Mayan, giving it a smooth flowing impression, like a figure by Zuniga. Esmeralda's restaurant was called Antoijos Mayas. It was a three-sided thatched hut with ceiling fans and small wooden tables. Her menu was posted on a blackboard daily and consisted of local Mayan and Mexican fare. The average price of a meal was $3, and although I took my meals with her household, this was what I paid her. Chan was right. She was a superb cook. That first night she served a squash soup and shredded wild turkey rolled in blue corn tortillas, covered with a pumpkin seed sauce. After 3 days of eating tamales from platform vendors, it was a veritable feast. All Mayan huts have the same form, although their size may vary greatly. The yotoch, as it is called, is bathtub-shaped and has no windows, only a front and back door. The walls are either wattle and daub or whitewashed adobe, and the roof is always a heavy thatch. The inside is cool and dark, and with hammocks strung across strong support beams, very practical. Outside there are often fruit trees, milpas, cornfields, fragrant flowering plants, animals, and the kitchen hut, which has a hewn stone or cement wood burning stove, a wooden table, and earthenware pots, and the like. Esmeralda's place consisted of a large family hut in the back, a small visitor's hut beside it, a kitchen hut, and a short walkway, the restaurant. There were avocado and mango trees, red and purple bougainvillea, and a few chickens and turkeys. She had a milpa several miles away. All in all, it was a naturally beautiful locale with a strange dreamlike peace. Chapter 4. My first night sleeping in a hammock in the jungle was an amazing experience. The sensation of near weightless suspension was very peaceful. A breeze blew through the open doors, gently rocking the hammock. The strangeness of the jungle noises enthralled me. Some were beautiful, including a bird call that sounded like a pebble plunking into water. Others were supremely distracting. The cicada concert became quite rowdy, and still others were evocative, summoning images of ghosts stalking in the shadows. The howler monkeys were, to say the least, most inconsiderate. Since they sat high in the trees, their cries, akin to animal growls or longhorn honks, penetrated and blared from everywhere. The cacophony of notes would quiet down for a moment after they yowled, as if the whole jungle was wondering whether they were sounding a predator alert or just mimicking one another. I was completely enchanted by my night in Eden. In the morning, I felt quite refreshed. After I got dressed and stepped out of my hut, I found Esmeralda in an embroidered tunic dress, feeding the chickens before she opened the restaurant for breakfast. Her shiny bronze skin glowed with freshly washed softness, and her braids were still wet. Jungle Maya bathed many times a day. Chan was scooping fresh water from the rain barrel with a ladle. "Good morning," Esmeralda sang to me as she scattered feed and hens clucked at her feet. "Good morning to you," I replied, walking over to her. "We'll have breakfast in a little while. There's a bucket if you want to bathe. I spent all day with the people in the restaurant. You're welcome to come and talk with me, but I think Chan would like you to watch his healing work today. See how we do things in this part of the world. Don't worry, you'll get used to the rhythm around here. I'm sure the pace is much slower than you're used to. Esmeralda smiled at me again and pointed in Chan's direction. You should go and watch him before we eat. He's getting ready to do the count. I turned and looked at Chan, who had set up a small table and 2 chairs under a tree. As I wandered over, I could see that the tabletop had a checkerboard design with about 20 red and black squares. Chan was seated in one of the chairs. A heavy-set man approached him. Greetings, Chutch, the man called out. Chan stood up, and the 2 men shook hands. The man sat down in the chair across from him. I went over and sat on a nearby tree stump to watch. Chan emptied a bag of crystals and coral tree seeds into a pile on the board. What is it you want to know? He asked. My life isn't going well here, the man said. I'm wondering if I shouldn't take my wife and move back to Piste, where her family is from, and abandon this area. Or should I leave her here and take a job as a jungle guide to the ruins of Bonampak, which a friend has offered me? It means that I'll be away most of the time, but I'll be able to send money home. Chan began to group the crystals and seeds into little arrangements within the squares. While making each small pile, he mumbled a few words, as if he were counting or praying. It appeared to be some sort of mathematical divination. When he finished, Chan looked up at the man. You should do both, he announced. Take your wife and children home and leave them with her mother in Piste. They can all live more happily for less, and your wife will be able to care for her mother, who'll soon need it. You may then take the job as a guide until something closer to Piste comes along. The man was elated and thanked Chan profusely, shaking his hand heartily several times. After the man got up and left, Chan swept the seeds and crystals back into his pouch and motioned for me to accompany him to the kitchen hut. Let's eat before too many people come, he called to me. Esmeralda set out fresh pineapple juice, papaya, scrambled eggs with fresh chilies, and tortillas for breakfast. As we ate, Chan dabbed the perspiration from his forehead after each bite of chili. Chilies are very good for your teeth, he told me. What was all that business with the seeds? I asked him as Esmeralda brought out some more tortillas. Chan is a Chuch Kahwa, Esmeralda said offhandedly. That means lineage head, or keeper of the sacred count in our language. In Tikal, close to where we come from, divinatory calculations were done in ancient times and then kept. While in a dream state and using the count, Chan is able to answer questions about the future. She glanced at Chan with pride and smiled. He's never wrong, she added. He sees into people, their motives, their energy, their designs. You'll witness that today. I listened respectfully while stuffing my mouth with papaya. Chan and Esmeralda glanced at each other. At that moment, Eligio, Teofilo, and Ignacio showed up and sat down at the table, greeting their mother first, then their uncle, and me in an exaggerated way, as if they shared an insider's joke. So how do you like it here? It's beautiful, isn't it? Teofilo asked me. Yes, I said, eagerly, still stuffing my face. Everyone laughed. Thought we'd come say hello before we go off to work, Eligio added. What do you do? I asked, grabbing a tortilla. We're guides at the ruins, but also work in our fields and hire ourselves out for the excavations, Ignacio told me. Have you eaten? Their mother asked. Yes, thanks, Mom, they all said in the same exaggerated manner. The 3 young men accepted cups of coffee instead. I recognized the custom of allowing someone you visit to do something for you, whether you really want it or not. Well, Eligio said, brushing off his white tunic shirt and rising politely from the table when they had finished their coffee. We're going. The ruins open early. I know our uncle is going to take you there himself. But if you need anything from us during your stay, please let us know. We're all at your service, he said gallantly. With that pronouncement, they kissed their mother, shook my hand, and grabbed a few tortillas as they went out the door. Several young Mayan women arrived to start the day's work at the restaurant. They were dressed beautifully in dark blue ruffled cotton skirts and embroidered off-the-shoulder white blouses. Esmeralda went off with them. Chan and I remained seated at the table in the kitchen hut. I felt strangely self-conscious as certain feelings surfaced inside me. I stared down at my food. I must have been blushing. When I raised my face, Chan was smiling knowingly. "Chach kahwa?" I asked him. This time he turned away. "Yes," he said softly. "You didn't know?" he asked ingenuously, cracking a smile. "Maybe I did," I mumbled as I nervously chewed on my tortilla. "We know each other already," Chan assured me as he stood up from the table. "You're a brave girl, Marilyn. When you're finished here, come into the curing hut. I'll have patience by then." He calmly strolled off in the direction of the smaller of the two dwelling huts. Watching Chan's cures that day was incredible. The hut was filled with dense, fragrant copal smoke. He had unpacked and began to use bundle after bundle of medicinal plants. The patients would enter, sit down in a chair across from him, and enumerate their maladies. Chan would sit and gaze at them, through the smoke, until he saw their energy. The recommended cures took myriad forms. Some patients were laid on a wooden table, covered with a thick straw mat. Then they were massaged with aromatic ointments, while Chan recited incantations. Others left with herbs and instructions on how to prepare and administer them, while some were instructed to take baths and/or were put on special diets. People would leave items to be empowered, or they would ask Chan to make them little bundles to carry around. I also saw him give people items to bury, place ignited paper cones inside patients' ears, fan smoke over them, and spit corn liquor around the bodies of others. Another part of Chan, almost like a hypnotic self, often took over and rose through the smoke to touch sparkling or dull places in the patient's energy fields, which could be clearly seen through the hanging copal vapors as a luminous cloud surrounding them. When this happened, Chan's breathing would change and become very audible, like air pumping into a bicycle tire. It was as if another body came out of him to heal his patients. The overall effect of this phenomenon was extremely graceful, exotic, and thoroughly mesmerizing. Chan appeared to have a strong effect on babies, and many mothers came with children who had stopped suckling or cried a lot and did not sleep well. He would slap the babies on their bellies, but they never cried, smiling back at him instead. He then massaged their little bodies and rubbed their palms while he cooed Mayan prayers over them. The babies always seemed gleefully animated afterwards, and the mothers left ecstatically happy and thankful. Payment was varied. There was a cylindrical basket outside the hut where people dropped money, or they would leave fruit, vegetables, candles, incense, chickens, whatever they had and could afford. The length of cure also varied. Some mothers brought their babies back for several visits before they were completely healthy and recovered. There was one elderly woman who could not walk. Her children carried her to Chan that afternoon for a healing, and she was asked to stay. She ended up sharing the curing hut with me for 9 days. After receiving massages and instructions, she was able to walk feebly on the 3rd day by holding on to her daughter's arms. By the 7th day, she could support herself with a cane, and on the 9th day, she was tottering around slowly without any aid. It was true what his nephews had said about people lining up for the cure. By late afternoon every day, There was a line all the way to the restaurant. When Esmeralda was short on customers, she would bring out the metal folding chairs from the restaurant for the people to sit. They could also help themselves to the cool water in the rain barrel. With all this activity, Antoijos Mayas did very good business. It was popular with tourists looking for that real local place and for the real locals. The restaurant was open from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, and the young Mayan women would work the entire day with alternating lengthy breaks and their 3 meals. Esmeralda supervised and cooked the food, as well as tending to things at the house and providing support for her brother when needed. This first afternoon, like those that followed, one of the young women from the restaurant brought out our lunch to the kitchen hut. We had chicken lime soup and red and blue corn gorditas, corn masa breads shaped into inch-thick ovals and stuffed with various ingredients, such as cheese or vegetables, and served with assorted sauces. The diverse colors of this dish were very appealing. After lunch, Chan stretched his arms at the table, no doubt tired from his strenuous morning schedule. He had changed into a light blue tunic and a freshly pressed pair of the area's white cotton pants. He now fiddled with one of his jade earplugs. There was a hole about the size of a slender drinking straw in each of his earlobes. "Where did you get those? They look old," I said, referring to the earrings. "Oh, a friend of mine found them at a site and gave them to me as payment for a healing. I had to pierce my ears so I could wear them," he remarked casually. He turned to me in a more serious tone and said, "Marilyn, I'm thinking of stopping early today, so we'll have the rest of the afternoon for exploring the ruins." "That sounds great, if you can spare the time," I said eagerly. Then I asked, "How much do you charge as a guide?" Chan actually shuddered and looked back at me with great patience. "This is not a money arrangement. I thought you understood that. You can invite me and do things for me whenever you like, and vice versa. Here," he said, and sweetly handed me a flat, dark green stone. "It's a jade. Somebody threw it in the payment basket." Chan stood up and left to treat the last of his patients for the day. I sat back in my chair and watched him walk away, pondering his extraordinary offer. Giving me the jade was a superb gesture. I should have been paying him, not only for showing me the ruins, but also for the rare glimpses into his healing practice, a line of study that now interested me immensely. All this given unconditionally. It made me wonder what strange fate had brought us together. Later in the afternoon, Chan donned a baseball cap turned backwards, picked up his machete, and said it was time to start out for the ruins. We headed into the jungle behind the huts. He hacked his way along a path, staying about 100 feet ahead of me. The deep green foliage reached out and enveloped us like a desperate lover. After a while, we approached a cool rocky stream. The birds greeted us with a song. "If we follow the stream down, it'll take us to the ruins behind the Temple of Inscriptions," Chan said, standing next to the rushing, gurgling water. "Going in the other direction would take us to the waterfall. This is the water that the ancient Maya diverted for their underground sewer system." We tromped down the stony green ground toward the site. The water flowing beside us was cold and bubbling. A sensation of timelessness amid the emerging sunlight was building within me. I began to see a break in the jungle, a clearing, and then the back of a monumental limestone pyramid. I felt very strange. "Chan," I called out. "Wait!" My knees were becoming weak. I was all rubber-legged, which was odd given my superb physical condition. I practically collapsed into a sitting position and instinctively stuck my feet, sandals and all, into the cold stream. I stared hypnotically into the clear flowing water. Chan crept back up to me, stealthily. Don't go to sleep here, he whispered, cryptically. It's time to wake up. A cricket started singing loudly. Chan tapped my shoulder softly and smiled with concern in his face, removing his cap. He then plucked tamarind seeds from the pod of a resident tree and handed them to me. Oh my God, I gasped. It's the dream, I cried, holding the seeds in my palm and looking up at Chan. My eyes were tearing. Now, for the first time, I was able to see him. His face, though middle-aged, had the ancient look of timeless experience. He had taut, tan skin, high, wide cheekbones. His long and narrow nose was not the classic beak seen in the faces of so many Maya. And yet for a moment, I saw him standing before me in the traditional white tunic of centuries past. I looked away, but his dark eyes bored into me with loving intensity. He was the man I had dreamed of on the first night I stayed with Don Juan. My body was numb with shock. It's all right. Come on, he cooed to me softly, holding out his hand. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of my willingness or ability to go on. But something shifted in me, and I held out my hand. I rose lightly into the air, as if leaving my body's weight below at the water's edge. We walked on, my hand held softly in his, until we reached the site in the shadow of the big temple. Dazzling light radiated from the edifices. They sputtered with coiled energy in the sunlight, like the tails of rattlesnakes. The baking white limestone rose in stark geometric shapes, reflecting against the dark green rustling jungle. Massive mirages balanced on the colossal scales of architectural perfection. They towered over us, glaring down at us as if they were gods incarnate. Do you know who's buried here? Chan asked, referring to the towering step pyramid topped with an oblong temple. The Temple of the Inscriptions houses the remains of the Ahua Pakal Votan, I expounded, gazing at a hieroglyph from my somnambulistic state. I perceived in my mind's eye a deep tomb and a mosaic jade death mask. He ruled in the 7th century AD, the classic period of the kings, before the post-classic rise of the warriors at Chichen Itza. Good, Chan whispered, tapping my forehead between the brows with his index finger, and then pointing to a smaller temple on a far hill with a skyscraping lattice roof comb. And there are housed the remains of his son, Cham Balam, I uttered in a trance, and then added, which have not been discovered yet. I was taken aback by the certainty of my pronouncement. Archaeologists only suspect that Cham Balam is buried there. Chan smiled. So? He affirmed. He pulled me to the palace across from the temple. I stared at its tall watchtower. We entered a low stone doorway and could see the bedchamber. Somehow I knew that the slab would be covered with jaguar furs. Outside the sleeping area, I also recognized the steam chamber, a sunken stone room for bathing, with its U-shaped squatting hole, both graced with water flowing underneath. We strolled into an interior palace courtyard. The four ends had several stairs, each set leading up to columned platforms that were formerly covered by thatched roofs. This palace looked familiar. The reliefs showed a noble in a full woven straw and feather headdress sitting cross-legged in one of the four seats of honor, while in the courtyard below other nobles perforated the tips of their large, stylized penises. I could almost see him observing them, sitting elegantly in long green quetzal feathers. Chan sat down cross-legged on the northerly of these platforms and motioned for me to do likewise on the southern platform opposite him. This ritual, he said, nodding at the reliefs, was to induce visions. He spoke loudly enough for me to hear him across the short distance of the courtyard. There is a species of sacred mushroom that has always grown in these parts. On the night of the ceremony, the genital or tongue flesh was perforated with thorns or sliced with an obsidian blade. The spattered blood was caught on paper made of fig bark and read for its design, then offered up, burnt to the gods. At that moment, powdered mushroom would be pushed into the wound and sniffed through the nostrils or smoked. The fresh mushroom flesh would also be eaten or drunk in a liquid boiled with water and the blood of the participants. What type of visions were produced? I asked, completely entranced. Ecstatic visions of deities and their realms and designs. Visions of time, the now, before, and after. Chan responded somberly. I still collect the mushrooms from around here and perform this ancient ceremony on occasion. He lifted up his shirt and revealed fine-lined scars on his torso, as if bearing his heart. Someday, I think you will want to participate with me. The prospect was intriguing. Is there a Mayan calendar here? I asked him impulsively. Not long ago, I dreamed of one in the forest, not far from these ruins. I was referring to the stone disc calendar from my dream on the first night with Don Juan. You, yes, it was you. You threw tamarind seeds. I opened my pocket and pulled out the seeds given to me earlier. You threw tamarind seeds on 2 of the dates. I blinked, stupefied, staring at the seeds again. I felt like I was falling through the center of the earth. There are calendars and many calculations, but they're not here. I am, though, Chan said gently. One calendar is ceremonial and is based on the 260-day cycle of the fetus in the womb. Another calendar is annual and measures time in 18 groups of 20 days each, with 5 days of purging at the end of each year. The first calendar is prophetic and runs backward from AD 2012 to 3313 BCE. That's the one I mean, I called out, feeling that I not only knew something about it, but was intimately connected to it. All the calendars were designed a long time ago, and the annual was later adjusted in Xochicalco, he continued, peering at me from across the courtyard. All of them are still used by Maya today. There were also calculations done on the phases of Venus, which is the light in the heavens that represents Kukulkan, and which go backward from the time of the calendars, some 50 million years, and ahead to 2012. I experienced a momentary vision of the blue light of Venus in the night of sky sparkling and becoming the totality of my right eye. Why does the prophetic calendar stop? I asked, and then had the eerie realization that I had repeated, almost word for word, this question from my earlier dream. That's the part of the mystery. The mystery the mushroom smoke might help you unravel, Chan said. Have I been having some kind of prophetic dreams? You could call them that, or you could say that you have been seeing, remembering, or even awakening. How will I know when it's time to try the mushrooms with you? You'll know by your urgent need to understand what's happening to you. It'll be very powerful, more powerful than it has ever been, even more powerful than it is right now, at this moment, he said, staring off, deep in thought. I told Chan the story of Richard Morrison and Don Juan. He listened attentively while the sky turned scarlet and then purple. Cicadas and nightbirds began to call. It was winter, and so the jungle was fresh and fragrant at the twilight hour. Chan's eyes had become slits peering into the vastness of the unknown mystery. He's very wise, that old Indian. There's more to him than meets the eye. As for your lover, I agree with what Don Juan told you about him, that he served as a bridge to get you here. What's going to happen to me now that I'm here? Marvels. I have counted you, Chan replied solemnly. It'll be better if we let your designs unfold naturally, and I give you guidance as you go along. Just trust in your instinctive power to always do the right thing, in the intent you bring with you to this world, and in your own tremendous energy. Things are going to culminate rather mysteriously. Chan lowered his head again and closed his eyes for a moment, then stood up from his cross-legged position in one fluid movement, brushing himself off. He walked down to the bush level and stepped into the jungle. It had become quite dark. Chan returned with a torch, crudely fashioned from a thick branch and some dry banana leaves. The light from the flame cast strange shadows on the stones and the reliefs. We withdrew from the palace and walked off the site, our feet mingling with the small, moist plants until we reached the trail. Chan said we had better catch the local bus instead of returning through the jungle at night to avoid the occasional jaguar. As we waited for the bus in the damp, blue blackness of the night, I asked him, what would happen if I tried the smoke now? He smiled and patted me on the head. You wouldn't understand it yet, he replied gently. Not quite yet,